Did you think the marquee matchup, the G2 Vitality one, was a banger? It was pretty good, right?
I thought it was actually a pretty good game.
Fun game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. That's one Monty where I feel like people are being way too reductive, acting like Vitality could have never won. Like, dude, they definitely could. They had moments where, like, I thought that was a very competitive game, mate.
Yeah, it was very competitive. I will.
Draft was a bit hard for them, maybe.
Yeah, Vitality's draft was a little weird. I mean, we talked about this previously, but my problem with Aurelion Sol is that, you know, if you're going to pick Zeri and Lulu with it, then I think you have to pick a tanky top laner. I would prefer to see a more aggressive pushing early game bot lane than Zeri and Lulu. But Zeri and Lulu at least has pretty big all-in potential once you hit level 6 in the laning phase, and you can start to play more aggressively at that point in time. So it's about shepherding the Aurelion Sol in. Also, you're playing into Cassiopeia, so it's not like there's a huge like dive or kill threat against the Aurelion Sol, so it does make it easier to get it through the laning phase. My real issue is that why would you play Zeri and Aurelion Sol with a Camille in top lane?
That felt like trying to have your cake and eat it, yeah.
Like, what does this composition actually do? It can't 4-1 splits. You know, Zeri's not amazing at sieging turrets, and neither is Aurelion Sol. You can get caught out, especially by a Vi. If you walk up and Vi point and click ults you, you know, you can actually just get caught when you're sieging a turret. I guess maybe you have some disengage from the Gragas and the Lulu, which makes it easier, but it's certainly not like an ideal siege composition. And so even accelerating the Camille, you can apply pressure in the side lane, but you can't necessarily easily apply pressure without getting engaged on in a different lane, right? And then the other issue is that in order to deal consistent damage in the late game on Aurelion Sol, you need a tank line. Like you have to have some form of tank line. And so when Bo is building a Night Harvester jungle Gragas and you have a Camille, how does Perks actually set up to deal damage at any point in time? I think that's the main issue here is that, yeah, you can disengage, but you're just putting people out of, you know, if you use Gragas Barrel to disengage or you're kiting, you can't deal a lot of damage as Aurelion Sol. So I think you need much more what we saw the next day when we saw Vitality play Astralis, when Astralis is playing Sion, Annie, Viego, Aurelion Sol with Varus. Like, this makes a lot more sense in terms of front-to-back team fighting, and they did well. Now, in spite of that, in spite of having like a questionable composition, they did get some edges for Camille, and I do think that, you know, Bo struggled.
They could have done so much more with that Camille, though, couldn't they? Come on, man.
They could have done more with
If this was LPL, they would have just won the game off that.
They clearly had some communication issues. Like Bo, there was one dragon fight in particular where Bo decided to engage when they had priority on dragon. They were literally doing the dragon, and if Vitality had just waited for G2 to be forced to engage on them, they could have kited and probably turned it around, but Bo just like inted into the fight and then they lost the fight. Like he didn't need to engage with that composition. Like he fundamentally didn't understand what his job was within that comp. And they had mixed calls around how to finish an objective, and that really hurt them, because I feel like with this composition, because it is more difficult to operate because of the way they drafted, there's very low margin for error. And that made the game somewhat problematic. But even then, Vitality was at touching points from winning it at certain points in time, but it did feel like this draft wasn't it.
I mean, even towards the end of the game, like, it was just like ballsy players from G2 to just close the game quickly. Like, you could tell if you were Vitality, like, Upset was just waiting for that one fucking angle to clean up a couple of people in a fight and then get the right target, and then you'd have a chance, you know.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think the draft from G2 conversely was really quite good. They had a ton of ability, you know, to counter engage with Cassiopeia ults, or, you know, they had all the healing coming in from Mickey X on the Soraka. Yike had a great game. So not to take away from G2, because they're obviously still a very good team, and I think Vitality did struggle this week, but some of those issues I think were drafting issues, and also Bo just being pretty underwhelming.
Because the one problem I have is this. I sort of agree with you, but this is one area where I think there is actually a stylistic mistake that they're doing in Vitality at the moment. You know, when I said in the past episode, like, what makes me so hyped about this team is the idea you could play through all three lanes. Obviously, A, didn't mean simultaneously. And B, when I say play through all 3 lanes, we'd very rarely be playing through top and bot at the same time. Because the problem with these drafts is it's just perks like, cool, now I've got upset, I can just play the supportive mid. It's like, yeah, but your top laner wants to play a carry. How are we going to have like the fucking bot lane and the top? But it's only one person. You're literally, that's like that fucking old torture they used to have in Rome where they put you between 4 horses and they fly in 4 different directions and just rip you apart completely. Like that's like what you're doing to this guy. Because the point is, like we're saying up this game here, he had a Camille that was ahead, right? If that's the LPL, just fucking bang that lane all day long. Let's turn that into a win. But wait, Upset's the best player on your team. So it's like, you're making it too hard. Like in this scenario, you got to streamline it a bit more. I think you're trying to get too cute with these drafts.
I also just don't see why Perks needs to be on Aurelion Sol. Like, slap this motherfucker. Like, I preferred it. I preferred the game that they played against Astralis when he was on the Lissandra. Like, if Photon's been having some very good games, why not just enable Photon and Upset? Put Perks on the Gragas. Why can't Perks play Gragas?
Why not? Yeah.
I think that would be a pretty excellent call for them at this point in time. That way you actually have strong 2v2 synergy. Like he should be Faker and on this roster, and they should be moving around the map with him, trying to get the dives down in bottom lane. Like Bo likes to play aggressively. Bo and Perks have had good synergy on the whole this year. So it's time just to enable bot. And Photon, we've seen, can do very well in these carry matchups in isolation. So just like unleash him, let him go, and have that game plan. And I think Vitality's strengths are really quite clear. Even in the Astralis game that they lost, they didn't stop fighting, and they were actually playing really well from a macro sense from behind. Perks they were cross-mapping for bounty objectives, right? They were making choices such as, we're going to give up this Baron because we can take a dragon, get the bounty gold. We can take turrets, get the bounty gold. And that's a better way for us to come back into this game. Perks had a really good Lissandra teleport to try and deal with a situation when they were behind and make the Hail Mary play, which was successful. And they were starting to pull themselves back into this match, despite really having no business being there with the terrible early game that they had. So you see that Vitality still, they're retaining the Perks shot calling, which is such a valuable aspect of any Perks team, but they need to figure out, I think, a more solid identity than what they've been showing, because they've been ping-ponging around different strategies, and these drafts that they're playing lack a real cohesive identity.
No, exactly. They're trying to 500 IQ these things. It's like, you don't have to, with your team, you just do a simple draft, mate. Like you're saying, and play it cynically.
If you look at the draft that they played against SK Gaming, it tends to make a lot more sense, right? Jax, Vi, Cassiopeia, Lucian, Nami, right? Like you understand what you're getting here. It's a composition that has strong CC, can set up for the lower range Lucian relatively effectively, high DPS, can team fight very well, but also has split pushing capability. And I would say it's a more reliable form of siege, because Cassiopeia can zone people off of turrets, and so can Nami, so that Lucian can get some dashes in and some damage there onto a tower. So it I think is a better team fighting composition, also a better composition at executing a 4-1 split push.
All right, here's my little rant, Monty. A patented Summoning Insight Thorin rant. Are you ready? So, you know how people who are fans of Reckless, irrationally, it's never his fault no matter what. Even if he objectively in the game failed, it would be something like, yeah, but why didn't a teammate do this? Or why did they even put him on that champion? There's always a reason. It's never his fault no matter what. It's the other way around, I've learned with Upset, dude. It's always his fault no matter what. Dude, this is how you know people irrationally, I'm going to make that clear, irrationally hate Upset. Because people are acting like Vitality was already a flash in the pan and it's over. Guys, you do know they've only played 6 games with Upset. Here's how it went. The first 3, he didn't die and they smurfed the whole league. Week 1, remember, he didn't even play a whole split. G2 played with this lineup the entire last split, and all playoffs, and now they're here. Secondly, this week, oh, what a bad week, Monty. They went 1 and 2. But then you look at the context. First game, they murked SK Gaming, who you motherfuckers are all going to tell me is like the real second best team in the world. Well, which is it? Are they LEC rather? If SK is the real second best team in the league, well, then I've got a pretty good feather for the cap of Vitality, haven't I? They just beat them. And that's the same roster in SK that played the last split. But then let's go on, shall we? So then Vitality lost to G2. 1, we just pointed out that was a competitive game. 2, G2 are far and away the best team, according to everyone who doesn't rate Vitality. So that one doesn't even fucking count. Then there's one last game, Monty, and are you ready? In theory, historically, you could all dunk on me now. They lost to Astralis. The same Astralis who beat G2 last week. Guys, you are broken in your brain if you are looking at these results and going, they're just bad and trash and they should change players and they're not even good. By what metric aren't they good? And also, didn't everyone tell me Mad Lions were really good last split? They're like one of the worst teams in the whole league right now. And Koi's dog shit. The league is in shambles. Vitality is one of the brightest spots in the league. They're just having some minor teething problems on week 2 of by the way, the second week that their star upset has played this year. Give them a fucking break. Mate, like, I'll start hating with you in the groups if they're shit and they're losing best of 3s. This is just haterism, guys. Effectively, they have lost one game that could look bad to Astralis, and Astralis is on a heat of this split and actually, like, overperforming like motherfuckers so far. I don't know what there is to hate on. Like, as we're talking about, these things are mad fixable, Monty. Stylistically, we change how you play around the top lane when he's ahead. Draft-wise, you can see what you could obviously do. Like, I think this is where, again, I'll use the same analogy. If you're selling now, you're morons. Like, I'm buying more. This is where, if this was the stock market, I'm buying more Vitality stock as you guys sell and it goes down. I'm buying more bags of that shit, homie.
Well, it's also strength of schedule, right? Their next week is playing BDS, Heretics, and Koi, which are all very winnable games for them.
They should win all those games.
I mean, BDS has been pretty good, but at the same time, I think if we're honest about where BDS is, I don't think that they are a better team than Vitality.
Well, I'll give you an angle.
They've been struggling in the late game for sure. Like, this is where Vitality has been shining, I think, has been in the late game scenarios.
And also, the real problem if your BDS is your best player's Crowley. I've got a player that's better than him. He's called Upset. By the way, there's the other thing people don't mention who hate on Upset. You know, Upset's only played when he played SK Gaming. That was his 4th official game in 2023. Who was he going against? Oh, the guy that you all told me was the best ADC in Europe. And then he played what against him? Lucian Nami, that bot lane that all the teams have problems with. Shut the fuck up. They won that game. He beat him. The guy you all tell me is the best ADC. By the way, he probably was the best ADC last split. It's a fair take. Exekick was very good on SK Gaming. So yeah. I don't know what the haterism is like. At this point in time, look, I'll do it with reckless. I mean, I have good reasons to hate on it, but like, just say you hate him, mate. Just hate him.
It's just fanatic fans that are salty that Upset isn't carrying them to wins anymore. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's just salt. It's just salt, boys.
But I still have a lot of hope and Vitality, and honestly, like, this team doesn't. The only purpose.
And you said it there as well. Actually, this was one of the few weeks where I saw Bo have a legit, real bad game. Like, I actually did think that one of his games was fucking shit, mate.
Yep. And it really doesn't matter, because as long as the purpose of this first part in the new format, and people are overreacting to this, is just to not get bottom 2.
Yes.
Like, you literally just have to be in the top 80%. That is the entire purpose of this, because it doesn't really matter. Like, okay, you might get a harder group, which might make it like more difficult to make top 4. But at the end of the day, you're heading into best of 3 double elimination. And like, that's pretty consistently going to churn out the top 2 teams. And I think Vitality, they had a strong round robin last time, and then we saw them kind of get exposed in that best of 3 segment of the format. And I just don't think we're going to see that from Vitality this time. Plus, they could lose all their games and they would still likely make top 8, because they already have 4 wins. It's incredibly hard to get eliminated in this format with 4 wins. Incredibly hard.
Oh, they're not.
And they're not going to lose 3 games next week. Like, come on. Like, I think worst case scenario, this team is 5-4 at the end of this next week. They'll get a comfortable spot. Then we'll get to see what they can do in best of 5s.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.